Welcome everyone to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Stargirl Season 2, Episode 3. It's called Summer School, Chapter 3. So, full spoilers for the episode, as always. So, I've actually watched this episode twice, because I watched it earlier in the week, then didn't have time to record, and then watched it again, because it had been a few days, and I wanted to, remember what happened. It's a good start, usually, for talking about a TV episode is remembering it. But I'm not complaining though, because this was a pretty solid episode. It did a lot of fun things. I'm kind of liking how some of the build of the plots are connecting a little bit. This episode kind of links the Shade stuff to the Eclipso Diamond, which inherently links it to what Cindy's doing with her potential new team. And of course, the big stuff this episode is the Thunderbolt. It's we even get to see Johnny Thunder in a flashback in the opening, and it's the night that the GSA went down, where it's a scene to set up that Pat was kind of like, yeah, he got frustrated and he wanted to be out there with Starman, but he was definitely accepting of when he was told to stay behind. And we see this frustration out of Johnny Thunder as well, who is also left behind at first, but then Wildcat comes and gets him. It was nice seeing these characters. It was nice to get this little beat. But what's important about it is that it sets up that later, and eventually going forward, that Pat is going to understand and empathize with Mike and understand why he feels the way he does. Because a big part of this episode is that Mike is feeling left out. He is feeling out of the loop of the family. He's not involved in the GSA stuff. He doesn't feel special. And would you believe it, the pen that has been lingering around since last season finally came into play. And obviously, they set up Jakeem by mentioning him back in episode 1 of the season. And of course, we actually get to see him this episode eventually. But he's mentioned again. And I was like, oh, but we're really setting up Jakeem as the, because if you don't know, in the comics, Jakeem's the one who ends up with the pen, and I was thinking that throughout the episode, but I was like, but we also speculated maybe they'll change it and go with Mike. And this episode kind of explores that. It gives us this sense of like seeing what Mike is like. It introduces us to Thunderbolt and seeing what he's like, the sense of humor, the way the wishes work, and the intricacies of that, and all that stuff is mostly pretty fun. I got a kick out of most of this. I've seen some people complain about the CG, the visual effects on Thunderbolt, and I don't quite get it. I don't understand why this is remotely an issue. Because he's not. How do I put this? Because he's meant to be a being made of magic, it can kind of look as bad as it wants, and it doesn't really matter because he's not real. Does that make sense? When you put like a werewolf or something, or you put like a robot, or you put something that's meant to physically be there in the scene, and the CG is not that good, it sticks out, and it can sort of take you out of it a little bit. I feel like when it's something like this that's kind of incorporeal. Yes. To a second, right? When you have something like that, and you have something that's meant to be this being made of energy, kind of like the Green Lantern constructs, like that similarly doesn't have to look that great. It just has to look like the green shape, and it's fine. So I never had a problem with the CG of Thunderbolt here, and I had some fun with the antics of there was a lot of little touches early on that sets up that Mike is feeling left out, where Pat doesn't even notice that he's got his clothes ripped and stuff, which leads to the pen. And then when we encounter these bullies that he runs in on his paper round, and they're picking on a little girl, so which I think is a really notable choice. It's an intentional choice not to have Mike just whip out the pen and use Thunderbolt to retaliate, and not even just for like the earlier bullying, but even if the bullies came after him again, and he chose to say "so cool," right, which they set up in this episode as being the trigger for Thunderbolt. I think it's very an intentional choice that makes us like Mike a little bit more. That the first time he chooses to use Thunderbolt for someone's comeuppance, it's actually to get justice for someone else. It's a little girl. It's this little innocent person that he's doing this for. It's not himself, and and no one would have blamed him. It's not like anyone would have been like, oh, if the bullies attacked him again, and he's a young teenager. No one would blame him for like making a mistake or being a little bit malicious and being like, you know what, I wish they shat their pants or whatever he might say. But yeah, it's just a little thing, it's a little detail that makes him a bit more heroic in the moment, I guess. Even if it is all a bit silly and backfires, and but the stop signs coming down and stopping them from moving when he said make them stop was, it was funny. It was a fun time. And this is actually when Courtney and Yolanda run into him, and we don't have to go through a whole like opening up of everything. This is kind of what leads to everyone knowing that the pen is active, that he's using it, and Pat's reaction, of course. There's a lot of little touches along the way that Pat lecturing Mike about the pen could have been tedious. It could have been a lot of things we sometimes expect from CW shows. And I think a lot of the little choices they made along the way kept it constantly being fun. Where when he says to Mike, "No, it's too dangerous. The wishes are kind of a monkey's paw situation. It's really hard to deal with. It's too dangerous for you to use the pen. It's not about trusting you. It's about trusting the Thunderbolt." And Mike reluctantly agrees, but immediately the pen magically just goes back to Mike, and it does it a few times. And it's these little things that make it kind of entertaining along the path of the thing, the story beats that have to play out with the logical father figure making the correct sentences and saying the right things and being responsible. And all of this is fun. It also neatly ties into the fact that, and I said this kind of last time with Green Lantern, but Thunderbolt also kind of looking like he's made from light kind of naturally goes up against the Shade. Although clearly, as we see later in this episode, it's not the most successful attempt, which I guess is a nice transition into some of that stuff. I actually really like the scene where Barbara's in the storage area where all the various evidence and all that is, and the Shade appearing, the lights going out, it treating it like a bit of a horror movie. I actually really like this sequence. I thought, and I think a big part of it is just I don't want to say hammy. That's maybe a bit harsh, but the overly posh kind of delivery that the Shade, like the actor's giving. Where one of the first things he says, like when she says, "Why are you here? Like, what are you doing here?" Like, "Well, your assistant, Caroline or whatever her name is. She said you were in here, and I thought, wouldn't it be exciting if we went on a bit of a treasure hunt together? Wouldn't that be thrilling?" And he sort of smirks a little bit. And there's just enough like sort of playfulness in his delivery of these lines that I think he's really coming across as a nice pulpy villain that's kind of perfect for a show about a bunch of teenagers who are ultimately going to be the ones to defeat him. I think I'm enjoying those elements, and then later in the episode when he's sitting there and insisting they try the tea and all these things, like I'm enjoying the I don't know, the comic bookiness, I guess. Like maybe that's a cop out to say, and like how do you define that, and how does it work when it works, and how does it not work when it falls flat on its face? But I think of a sense of knowing what it is, a sense of having fun, and just an enthusiastic performance go a long way. And them like coming up with this plan, Pat agreeing that Mike can help by finding the Shade by using a wish. We get a cheesy kind of montage of them trying to like figure out how to like word the perfect wish so it can't be misconstrued or have a monkey's paw effect. Just be straight up. This is and sure enough, he finds. I mean, if I have critiques with sort of like little bits of the writing or whatever, I did get a little bit annoyed at Mike when they do find the Shade, because Pat makes it very clear before they do this that okay, you can help find him, but you're not coming on the mission, right? Is that clear? And Mike agrees to this. And the second they find him on the map, he's like, "Let's go," and then he's like pissed that Pat won't let him go. And Pat's like, no, that was a deal. We made this deal right before the montage. Right before the montage, we made this exact deal. So it was one of those things where it was maybe the only time in the episode where I got annoyed at Mike for being a little bitch, basically, and it was just because he was being unreasonable. Like, it was very clear what deal you made, and I think I'd be fine with it if he phrased it a different way, where he said, "Come on, just let me go" or something. But he seemed to think and be surprised that he wasn't being like, he acted with shock. So you're not going to let me go seriously after I just helped? Like, no, shut up. And of course he comes in and ruins things, which I'm fine with because he has to fail, right? He has to go on this journey for multiple reasons. If he ever is going to be a true hero, he has to fail and learn how to do things the right way. That's something that all the other characters are going through still, and they should be. If he's going on this path where he feels even more alone, like he's failed, he might be more susceptible to what Cindy's got planned about, to turn them. Maybe it makes him more susceptible to the diamond and Eclipso. In that case, it also works. Him coming in and ruining the negotiation or the confrontation, all of that stuff makes sense, given where he's going soon and maybe where he's going ultimately beyond that. Like, it all works and makes sense. What surprised me, what I did not expect in this episode, is that they brought up early on that Mike killed Iceman. Or sorry, Icicle, not Iceman. Iceman's X-Men. He ran the car into Icicle. And then later in the episode, and this is something that I really didn't see coming, and I almost laughed a little bit, like that they were really bringing these things together, because when we reviewed the finale of season 1, we talked about how, okay, they're doing this big thing with Yolanda and her killing Brainwave, and will she feel guilty about that and all these things, but we also joked about how Mike murdered someone. I mean, yeah, to save them. Like, it wasn't like a completely unjust death or anything, but like, he did this kid who's like 12 or 13 did kill the bad guy. Like, that's kind of a big deal. And they kind of bring it up in this episode where Yolanda actually goes to him to basically have no, I don't want to quite say heart to heart, but when he's feeling bad about kind of ruining the fight and then them all getting their asses kicked by the Shade, Yolanda comes over and says, do you ever think about what happened with Icicle? And he reveals that it wasn't like super intentional. He was kind of in an adrenaline heat of the moment, and it was kind of an accident. Which I can kind of buy. It kind of works. It gets him out of what happened. It means that he doesn't have to go through the exact same thing Yolanda's going through. Part of that also might just because he's younger, he doesn't really quite get the gravity of it, and that's fine too. But I thought that was interesting. I thought it was interesting to have them actually compare notes a little bit here from a character perspective, and have Yolanda try and talk to him. But especially since Yolanda and Mike it's not exactly a pairing we get a lot of interaction between. So I thought that was an inspired little choice to sort of broach the storylines that more so Yolanda, but that both of them are going through. And it works in two ways. It works for Yolanda here because she feels she tried to connect with someone who might be going through something similar, only to find that it's not the same thing. Like, he kind of did it by accident. It wasn't this conscious choice out of anger that she made. And on Mike's side of this scene, he basically has to admit that the one big thing he kind of contributed before he got the pen, the one big thing he helped with, he didn't really do intentionally. It was an accident. So it actually makes him feel worse in a very different way to how it's making Yolanda feel worse. So again, both of them came out of this scene having their storylines advanced and having their character journeys advance, and that's good stuff. That's like, not every scene has to advance every character's plot. Some scenes are about one character and everyone else is there to function in their roles as a support system, and then they'll get their turn later. But when you can have a scene where both or more than two characters all have things advanced because the conversation brings things out for both of them, that's really economical with your writing time, and your screen time, and it's just impressive because it's hard to do. So it's just a little thing. It's not like, I'm not saying this is earth-shaking drama, but it's very neatly done on a network when I don't expect even regular drama to function as it should. So it's getting some points here for that, I think, from me. But it was an enjoyable scene, and I like both characters. I think this episode went a long way because this is definitely the most focus Mike has ever had. Like having him test out the powers at the start with, I wish I had some water and getting soaked. I wish I was taller. Then he's just standing on the bench. Like him interacting with Thunderbolt is the most kind of solo stuff he's had a chance to do. And it really does feel like they're elevating the character to a higher tier where he was easily the one with the least to do out of the family in the first season. And it feels like he's been elevated to be just as important and just as a big deal as any of the other GSA members. And not that he's going to be a GSA member necessarily anytime soon, but that's okay. I mean, of course, we do get the tease of Jakeem when Mike decides that he wishes that someone else who was more suited for the pen had it. The pen goes to Jakeem. I know this is a fine scene. There's not a lot to go on here. I will say I have one critique. I do think it's a bit on the nose after his sister calls him a loser. The way that Jakeem just sort of slumps and goes, "I am a loser," I thought was a bit much. Like we can get that hurt him and that he feels it and he feels like he's a loser without him just repeating it and saying that he is a loser. That was a bit on the nose. So small nitpicks where there may be, but I'm curious. It's the sort of thing where we don't have to see that some of the early development. Jakeem could possibly show up episodes from now having already kind of formed a bit of a camaraderie with Thunderbolt, and we can sort of jump in a little bit further down the line because we don't have to necessarily see the initial shock again because we already saw it with Mike. We can kind of make some assumptions. We can extrapolate a little bit based on what we've already seen, and then we can sort of learn how Jakeem handles it from there. So that's really fun stuff. And I think this show been willing to do a Green Lantern character, been willing to do the Thunderbolt, having a villain like the Shade who just kind of wipes the floor with them. It's all really good. I mean, Courtney did make me laugh a couple times this episode. I enjoyed her being kind of obnoxious with her mother at the start, because they're like, okay, so we got this guy, the Shade, he's in town, we're going to deal with this. And Barb is making some suggestions like, hey, maybe you should take Stripe, or maybe like you should have like a stealth mode or invisibility. And the way Courtney says, Mom, you're embarrassing yourself. Leave it to the professionals. Like, the way she says that is like she still gets so much humility to learn. She's still a teenager, and she's still very likable, but she's still very much a teenager who has some naive tendencies. And it's kind of refreshing seeing a character written that feels like, yeah, they're a bit immature, but not in a super annoying way. But it's it's entertaining. And likewise, later on, I very much enjoyed the smug look in her face when they're explaining to the rest of the team that who the Shade is and what his powers are. Courtney's all gun-ho about going to find them, and the rest of the team, understandably, using their heads, are like, but wait a minute, even if we find him, like, how do we fight him? Like, how do you punch a shadow? And Courtney's like, yeah, Pat, how do you punch a shadow? And Pat, like, knowing he's going to make her smug, and knowing this is going to, like, make her overconfident, goes, well, I did see Starman use the staff once to incapacitate him. And Courtney just turns with this big shitting grin. He's like, there we go, solved. I'll use the staff, it'll all be good. Happy days. Delightful little bits. And I think the show as well, obviously, it was juggling a lot of characters equally back in episode 1 of the season. Now it's focusing on, this is definitely a Mike episode more than any, and some Shade stuff. And obviously the team are there to advance the main plot, but then they don't get like a lot of individual time. But like I say, we get that really good scene with Yolanda and Mike to give her story a beat, which is nice. We also get a scene with Beth and Rick where Beth kind of opens up about why she's so agitated and why she's so frustrated. It leads to a nice tease for Eclipso, because Chuck does come on the goggles for a second before he like dies again, and is like, Eclipso's here, and we end with this ominous shot of the Shade standing on the bell tower in the middle of town. And then even Rick, has that one line where he says he was late because he was feeding the dog, and Yolanda's like, "You don't have a dog." Um, all fun stuff, all just little things to keep their individual plots in your head, if not advance them a little bit. And I think all the characters come off just a little bit better after this episode. Not much. I'm not saying there's huge strides. I'm saying they all come off like their stories either have advanced slightly. In the case of Yolanda, I feel like that conversation is a bit of a blow to her character, so I feel like there was a bit of advancement there in terms of how she's like thinking about it now. Not in a positive way. She's worse, but that's fine for the story. We're not there yet. Um, Rick still feeding Grundy and having to like make excuses for it, and then later on, he has the scene with Beth. He's the one who kind of like, hey, maybe you should talk to them. Like, as someone who doesn't have parents to talk to, just talk to them. Maybe it's not as bad as you think, or maybe honesty's the best. Like Rick actually comes across as a very level-headed and empathetic person in this scene, which I think is good for him, because those are the sort of scenes that because he was a bit one note last season with just being angry all the time. In fact, on that subject, when they're going to the house where the shade is, there's a lot of moment where he what's the line? He says something stupid like when I'm through with him, he'll be history, or that wasn't history, it was something else. But it was a sort of cheesy line that didn't make a whole lot of sense. And one of them calls him out on it and says, What does that even mean? And I actually kind of appreciated that he responds with, I don't know, I'm pumped. Like, it kind of added a little bit of humor to his generic angry lines that he makes when he's in the outfit. And he's, again, it's not a big thing, but it's just a little detail just to make it just a little bit more human and a little bit more likable. Like, it's like the show's admitting, yeah, some of the things he says when he's ready for a fight's a little bit stupid, or he's a bit too aggressive in one note. So we're going to poke fun at it just a little bit, just to we're in on it. We're in on the joke. We're in on what we're doing. It's not trying to insult your intelligence by trying to pass it off like it's some great one liner or anything like that. It's just nice, a little bit of trust with the audience. It's always good. So I've kind of talked around it, but of course they go in the shade sitting there, and he wants to give them tea, and he's like, I hope I got enough biscuits. And I was looking at those biscuits, it looked like he had shortbread, and shortbread is a very high quality biscuit, so I will stand up for that. I'm not much of a tea drinker, but I do enjoy a good biscuit. Sorry if that tarnishes. I mean, I feel like most people think of me as Scottish rather than British. Hell, I think of me as Scottish rather than British most of the time. But there is definitely stereotypes which you associate more with England about tea drinking. But I promise you, there is a lot of tea and coffee drinking going on in Scotland too. Directed by Leah Thompson this episode, which I'm sure this is not the first time. I remember seeing her name in previous episodes, but just nice that Lorraine McFly is doing good stuff. I hope if there's a time travel episode that she gets to direct it, just for some in joke at some point. Someone can crack a McFly joke. I'm okay with that. So yeah, no Cindereth in this episode, but I did get very excited when the shade, because it became clear obviously when he's in the storage room and Barb's getting all kind of scared of him, which again I really enjoyed his performance in this scene. I also liked that she was smart enough to immediately try and like text Pat or phone for help or whatever, but he's been very menacing. He's got her phone. Character decisions made sense. They were smart. But he finds the empty box, and you're like, oh, he's looking for one thing in particular, and we know exactly what it is. So later on, when he explains that that's what he wants, in fact, even when Barb says what the box was, Pat kind of like immediately knows what it is as well. So it very nice connection of this and the Cindy stuff. And it's kind of interesting that I don't suspect that the Shade's going to be happy with how the Eclipso diamond or the black diamond is being used. So I think it gives us this sort of third party effect where it's not, I don't see the Shade, at least immediately, being on side with the young villains and what could come from that. I think there's a lot of fun potential there. And already it feels like the season's very focused. It feels like everything is kind of connected in a nice natural way. Yeah, this is my favorite episode of the season so far. I think it. I appreciated a lot what it did with the Green Lantern stuff last episode, but I wouldn't say the episode as a whole completely clicked together as well as some of them do. I think this one, though, I kind of liked everything pretty much that it did, with some minor nitpicks of lines of dialogue or whatever. And I will not ignore the thematic stuff that's set up when they're in summer school and the teacher's talking about the end of civilizations. And I think thematically we're setting up there that, the Eclipso might very much be the end of our civilization. There's even a couple of references to, the current generation probably, speeding up the the potential apocalypse. Because, it's not even millennials anymore. It's all these Gen Z kids, and that's what they are now. These teenagers. I sound so old saying that. What's happening. What happened? Where did time go? Oh. Okay, that's pretty much the episode. I think I covered all of the main beats. I had a good time. I had a good time with this one. I enjoyed the comedy. I enjoyed the character advancements. Mike whining about not being able to go after that was already made clear to him was a little bit weird and silly. But for the most part, the characters' arcs are progressing, and we're being reminded of them, if not having them enhanced a little bit by having these small conversations amidst whatever the main plot of the episode is. So, good serialized TV episode. I rest my case. Excited to see how things go. And I don't think it's an accident that Green Lantern was not around for this Shade interaction. They're holding off on her being a secret weapon for Shade. I think it's fair to say. Not that I'm saying that they'll immediately win. They'll immediately win because of it, but I think it's notable that they didn't answer that potential question yet. They're holding that back for another big moment, which I think is smart because they've got 13 episodes to fill out their story with. So let me know what you thought of episode 3 of Stargirl. Apologies, it was a bit later in the week. Life stuff got in the way, and like I say, I was meant to do this earlier in the week, and I had to end up watching the episode again. But let me know what you thought of this one in the comments. Like and subscribe. It helps out a lot if you do that. That's why every YouTuber tells you to. Ding the bell as well for notifications. If you want to support the channel and everything we do financially, you can head over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and help keep all the content coming. And check out MailFuzz Movies for the movie review podcasts, where I talk to other people about sci-fi or horror movies, and sometimes other stuff too. But those are the consistent shows. So thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?